Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Welcome back to the simple push-pull EL34 amp build. Chassis came in, got most of my parts here, ready to put this thing together. And so, first thing we're going to do is some fab work. We're going to build 1 amp at a time. I want to go ahead and finish one channel, power it up, test it, make sure it works like we want, and then I'll just duplicate it for the other channel as a mirror of the one we're going to build. And this time I'm not going to go into just super detail of marking and punching and drilling every hole. I am going to go over in detail about the layout of the components and why I do things a certain way, because it's not just hodgepodge. I mean, a lot of it is based on the electronics and trying to reduce hum and the interaction with different components, and then some of it is aesthetic, so there's like a balance of the two, and trying to figure out how to make things look the way I want without causing negative side effects that you can sonically hear when you're listening to the amp. So I think this will apply to almost any project that you're going to build. I may have done this in past builds, but I'm really going to focus on that because I don't want people to just carbon copy this build. I mean, it's actually kind of a boring, some cheap Hammond chassis, just kind of knocking this thing out. This isn't something that I would call like an heirloom build or something that, you know, is for the ages. This is more of a, let's do a push-pull amp, and I want to see what kind of cool things y'all come up with on my forum and show me how you built something much cooler than what I did. So I hope that makes sense. And let's jump into the build. Okay, we got our two chassis, some 8x12x2 Hammonds that came in last week, and we're ready to start laying out the amplifier. And I want to go over quickly about the iron that I'm going to be using. I was originally going to build this as a Dyna ST35 clone, and they used a 330-0330 or 660 volt center tapped power transformer, and so that's what I ordered. Well, it looks like this Tubelab simple push-pull is looking for a little lower B plus voltage. The Dyna ST35 ran at 375 B plus, and he's suggesting between 320 and 340 volts B plus. Not sure how Dyna was running these tubes that have a high voltage limit at 300 volts at 375 volts. Maybe some of the new old stock tubes can handle that. And there are some versions of this tube, which we'll go into later, which can handle higher voltage. But to start with, we're going to be using the 5U4C, the Soviet indirectly heated tube that has a lot more voltage drop than a 5AR4 to get our voltage in the range that we want to see for this build. We're also going to be using this 157Q choke, which has about 250 ohms of DCR or direct current resistance, and that's going to also help lower the voltage down to the range that we're wanting to see from the power transformer that I bought. Now, the guy at Tubelab suggests using a 600 volt center tapped Hammond as being the right one to use with this, with a 5AR4, and I'm going to link below in the description a link to his website where he goes over the transformers to use and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure yet if the 660 volt one is really a bad idea. And it gives the option of changing out the rectifier tube to a 5AR4 and possibly replacing this one choke. And again, I'm not sure yet where we're going to go on the choke. There's another option that has a lower resistance we may end up using to get the voltage dialed in. And while I said you could follow along while I'm building this, some of this still is undecided parts on my end of my personal build, but you can follow the Tubelab's recommendations and build something that will definitely work with the EL84 tubes. Output transformers. There's a bunch of different Dyna 35 clones out there, and I'm using the EdCore examples. I saw that Musical Power Supply is now making one that's very reasonable. There's also another guy, Thermactic or something like that, that's making them on eBay. So there's several different people that have them in production. I know Dyna used to sell them, but they're out of stock and have been for a long time. And I'm not sure they will ever have them back in stock. So there's been several output transformer manufacturers that seem to have either retired, gone out of business, whatever's going on with them. They're no longer making output transformers. And so you kind of just have to get what you can find. There's also the option of buying some, used output transformers from a Dyna 35, from an SD35. And so that's another option. Anyways, 8K, 23% ultralinear taps is what we're looking to use for these. But this video, I want to focus on getting the layout done. And I thought a lot about this, and I think that this layout right here is what I want to do. We're going to put the power transformer over in this back corner. We're going to have the power supply jack underneath the transformer on this side. We're going to put this choke vertically, like right here. I guess there is an option. We could bolt it to the back wall and have it like this so the screws aren't visible and still have enough room for the wires for this guy. I'll decide that when I get to that part. The other thing we need to do is we need the power switch over here on this side, because this is going to be the outboard. I plan on having the other amp sitting on this side. And so we're going to have a power switch back here in this corner. We're going to put the rectifier tube right here between the choke and the output transformer. And then we've got these oriented at 90 degrees from each other, and these are not in the same plane. So this is, I think, an ideal way to lay these two out. We are going to have like a blank spot here that potentially could put some meter or maybe some biasing pots or something like that, as we want to experiment with different things with this amp in the future. Then I'm going to line the 3 9-pin tubes here across the front, equidistant from each other, and then leave a little space here. I decided I'm going to put a volume control on each amp. And that way you can adjust the balance by the volume on each amp. Then there's nothing connected between the two of them and that sort of thing. I just think it'll simplify the amp itself. And then over here in the front, we'll put the RCA jacks down low. And then have the shielded wire go across this bottom edge up to the volume pot to keep them away from these tubes and the heaters. And then while I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm wondering if it makes more sense to put the tubes like this and then put the volume control over here on this outside with the RCA jack right there. And have this be the input tube, and then have these two be the output tubes, and then run the wires over to the output transformer. And then we could have the speaker jacks over here on this side. Then we could run our heater wiring across like this and keep it away from the signal. That probably makes more sense when I'm sitting here looking at it. And then we could have a volume control on the outboard of each one. When I stand back and look at this, I'm just not sure, because I kind of like the way it looks with the two output tubes being in front of the output transformer. And then this guy here But the problem's going to be how to get the 6.3 volts to the heaters and still keep it away from the signal wiring. I guess I could run the heaters across like that and then angle it up and up there. And then put the volume pot there, like I was originally saying. I kind of like that. But again, on your own amp, you can decide how you want to do it. But from a performance perspective, that really does make more sense. Having them like that. And then having the volume control over here near the RCA jack. And then we can run the 6.3 volt stuff around in this corner up here, back to the transformer. The other advantage to doing it like this, we could put a front mounted power switch on each amp, and then we'd have the AC over here going back to the power transformer, and it would be away from the input tube. And while that doesn't look a little different than some of the amps I've built in the past, I think that'll work. And it keeps my goal of keeping the low voltage signal as far away from the AC as I possibly can. And you basically got the power transformer diagonally across the chassis from where the RCA jack's going to be. I think I'm going to do it like this. And again, sometimes when you are doing this kind of layout stuff, what you initially think might be a great idea, when you stop and just look at it, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And you do have to kind of think through the problems that you're trying to avoid, which the main one on the layout is hum and keeping the AC away from any low voltage signals that are coming into the amp. So let's lay it out like that. And again, this output transformer could be moved up just a little bit. And I may tweak some of this positioning, but it doesn't make sense to put it over here, to me, and having it this close to the power transformer when we can put it over here and it's not, these laminations are like at 90 degrees and not even in the same plane with each other. Makes more sense to just get it over this way. And then again, we can put a little meter or something over here. Let me spin this around so you can see this better. See, when I turn it around, then we have this blank spot right here that we could put a meter or some bias pot adjusters if we decide to try fixed bias on this amp, which is something I would like to try, and then we could compare cathode bias versus fixed bias in a push-pull amp, which is, my understanding, is where they really shine. I'm also going to use my little trim rings on these tubes. I've got enough to do silver on this amp, and then put one of these larger ones on there. I think that'll look really nice. And let me go grab this meter that I'm talking about. And it looks like this, and there would be plenty of room to do a cutout and put this meter, somewhere in here. And it's a millivolt meter that could be used with a shunt resistor to measure the current on the output tubes, which you obviously would need to have if you're going to have a fixed bias amp. So I think leaving this space open here gives us the option of, adding that and then a couple of trim pots here in front of it, provide the functionality we would need for a fixed bias amplifier. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get all this AC stuff all mounted here in the back. The problem with mounting this choke vertically is it's the same height as the chassis. And so would be no way to put a bottom cover on it without it rattling. But historically, I haven't put covers on the bottom of my amplifiers, and I do put little feet in the corner. And so mounting it like this, it'll take up the least amount of room, and I won't get these pins from this rectifier tube anywhere near, because if I do it this way, it's going to be near the metal. It's just going to make it harder to wire stuff. So I think I am going to mount it like this, even though it will add a couple of screws to the top plate, which I'm not a big fan of. I can't really mount it this way, because I think that'll get, as you see, I'm having to move the rectifier tube up. I'm going to put this probably as far in the corner as I can, but I don't want this overhanging where the power transformers would be right up against each other. You want a little gap between them. So yeah, there's nowhere to put the rectifier tube in there. And this does keep these at 90 degrees to each other, so you don't have the choke picking up noise from the power transformer. Yeah, I think that's the way I'm going to mount that. And then put this rectifier tube as far back as I feel comfortable putting it. And try to keep the AC behind like this line here. And that'll give us some room underneath the power transformer to put the filtering caps and dropping resistors and that sort of thing. And then the B plus will all be in front of this line here. So I think I'm going to mark the layout on this stuff, figure out where I'm going to put the power input jack, and worry about where I'm going to put the power switch later. If I want to put it in the front or if I want to, put it back here in the back. We may end up having to put it in the back anyway because the 9-pin tube sockets are going to be mounted up here pretty close to the front. And there may not be enough room to have them there. So we may end up, well, not here, it'll be over on this side. We'll have the power switch. Okay, so I'm going to mark some of this out and then come back on camera and kind of show you the layout and drilling these holes to get ready to mount all the power supply stuff. Okay, so I got the basic parts marked off here. We set the transformer on here and scribe the holes that I want to drill through here. Then I did the same thing with the choke. We set it up here and marked the holes. Then this is a really great little tool I got off Amazon that can be used for making sure that these holes are even from the edge for each one, and then marking the center points here for the wires to go through. And it's got a scribe here, and this little roller goes on the edge. And the only trick to it really is making sure that this part of this is parallel to the surface. So next we're going to mark these off. We have our little center punch here. We got some wood underneath to support the holes we're going to drill. This is the center point of the tube. And I'm probably going to zip along on this amp a lot quicker than that last one, because this is not like an heirloom kind of amp that I'm worried about messing up a $30 Hammond chassis. I do have two of these sitting here, and if I have to order another one because I drill a hole in the wrong place or something like that, it's not super concerning. So we're going to mark all these holes. Come in and start off with my pilot bit like I always do, to get the centers of the hole established. And there we go. So the next thing we're going to do is deal with this big hole here for the octal socket, and we're going to be using one of these green leaf punches. And so we need to drill a hole this size to have the draw bolt go through. And we'll probably do it in 2 steps. Put a little cutting oil on the bit. And let's make sure we got our wood underneath that hole. And then get our final hole. And then to protect the top surface, I get a piece of paper and Double thickness works good. I mean, a single thickness would probably be fine, but you go like this, and that protects the top surface of the chassis from that dye. And you come in and kind of wiggle that a little bit while I'm tightening it up. Get a wrench and turn the draw bolt. There's one pop. There's the other. We get a nice perfectly round hole for our octal socket. It's sitting there just like that. And we're going to mount it in this direction like this, horizontally. The trick with drilling these two holes is we're using this ring that is also the nut for the screws. And so you need to make sure that you drill these two holes this distance apart, which you can measure with some vernier calipers. Then transfer it like this, which I'll do off camera, and then just drill these two little holes. Make sure I'm a little precise on that, because it's pretty ugly if you get those off center. And then the screws will go through the socket, through the chassis, and then thread into this ring, and then there's no hardware on the top, which I think looks really good. So the next thing I want to do is figure out the size holes that I want to put the bolts for to hold this choke down, and then the same thing for this power transformer. Then pick out some grommets that will allow each one of these bundles of wires to come through, and then enlarge these holes to fit those size grommets. So I'm going to go do that and come back and show you what all that looks like. Okay, so we got the holes drilled here for these power supply parts here in the back, but when I was looking at this and spending a little more time, I think I am going to lay out the front a little different. I think I am going to put a power switch right here in this corner on the front, and then run a twisted pair of wires with the AC back to the power transformer. And since we're going to be putting the input tube over here on this corner with the volume pot and then the RCA jack, the signal's going to be far enough away where I don't think we'll have any problem with picking up hum way over on this other side of the amp. So I think it'll look nice to have an indicator and a power switch here on the front. Going to put the cathode resistors right here on the top behind the two output tubes. Output transformer is going to go right here. I've got a set of these really nice speaker jacks that we can put right here under the output transformer, and I can paint one of these red so that we'll have 3 red and 1 black, because we've got a 4, 8, and 16 ohm tap. And while I probably will only use the 8 ohm ones, I might as well put the connectors there on the outside of the amp, since that's what the transformer has. And then we could play around with putting the 8 ohm speaker on the 4 or the 16 ohm tap and see what that sounds like, or that kind of stuff. So we're going to pull all those out and solder them on here on the side. I'm going to try a different volume control than I've used in the past. I've used Alps and used Audio Note before, but I'm going to try a little Bourne's, kind of a cheapy little single mono control for this amp. And they're supposed to be pretty high quality, and I really didn't want to put a stereo, 2-gang volume control if we're only controlling mono. So I'm going to give one of those a try, and I've got those on order. They should be here first of next week. For some reason, I never can seem to figure out everything I need in one order. And I know some people get irritated, like paying for shipping on 2 or 3 orders, but I've just gotten used to never being able to figure out everything I need in one order. So Anyway, they should be here the first of next week. I really don't want to drill these tube socket holes until I see what this volume control is going to look like, and then kind of play around with the tag strip that is going to be on this tube. I may end up, if I've got room, moving this one over a little further and maybe even turning it sideways like this so I can put a tag strip on each side of it. I need to see how much room I have with this smaller volume control and see if I've got enough room to do that. I mean, it would look okay, I think, having the one smaller tube over here and then having the two larger tubes over there. So I'm going to wait to do this drilling. I'm probably going to go ahead and drill the hole for this switch, although I may wait till the volume control gets here just so I can make sure I get these symmetrically done. And then I'm not going to mount these either. Probably going to go ahead and drill the holes and mount this output transformer and get that just kind of nailed down, because I know it's going to be somewhere in this area. And if this tube needs to move forward or back a little bit, it's not going to have any impact on where this is. And I want to make sure I kind of nail this down, getting it away from this AC power supply stuff. So let me spin this around and show you the back side. Okay, so we've got a rectifier tube. It's going to sit right here like that. And these are the two mounting holes for the choke. And I think I'm going to do something a little different this time. I think I'm going to put little acorn nuts on the top for the hold the choke down instead of having the screws on the top. Just be something a little different and maybe be not as obvious that, hey, we had to put the screws through the top. So we're going to go with that. Then I've got the holes and the grommets here for our power transformer. Again, we're going to be putting the power switch up here, way up here in the front, and so, you know, we don't have to worry about drilling a hole for the switch. The only thing left we have is mounting this guy, which these are irritating to me to mount. I've thought about using the little saw blade or the cutoff wheel in the Dremel tool, but that gets really hot, and I'm concerned about it doing something weird to the powder coating and melting it and having it lift up off the surface. So I'm going to hand saw these out after I drill the four corners and then clean it up with a Dremel and maybe a little bit of a hand file, and then get this mounted. I'm going to mount it right centered under the power transformer, and then I'll have all of the fab work done on the back half of the chassis. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes here in the front for the output transformer, and probably go ahead and drill the holes on the side here for the speaker terminals, and then wait for that volume control to get here to figure out the last little bit of layout on the front part of the amp. So we're going to wrap up this video right here. Well, here we are. Did a couple of things off camera. I drilled these speaker jack holes here. I got the output transformer mounted, or the holes drilled. Got these hole drilled for the switch, and this side's blank because this is where the two amps are going to sit up against each other. And I got the IEC socket all sawed out and drilled and everything. We're all ready to go with that. The only thing that I haven't done yet is I haven't punched the holes for the 9-pin tube sockets, and I'm not sure yet exactly where they're going to go, and I'm waiting for the volume control pots, the mono ones that I ordered. They should be here early next week. I want to get those mounted and then really study what components are going to need to go around, especially the input phase splitter tube. I think there's going to be a lot going on around it. We may have to put tag strips on both sides of it, and so I want to, lay all the components out physically and just kind of look at them and make sure where I want to put the tubes, and I've got enough room around the tubes to put all the components that need to be there. And again, that's kind of part of the planning process, and there's a lot of room here where I could put these 3 tubes, and I want to put the power switch in because it's kind of a long one, and make sure that I've got plenty of room around it. Anyway, got a lot done, and I'm excited with our progress. I do want to leave enough room here for future playing around with fixed bias I think that'll be fun to see the difference between a cathode bias and a fixed bias and the power output and the distortion and that kind of stuff, and see how that affects a push-pull amp, because again, I've heard that's really where fixed bias makes a big difference, is on a push-pull amp. So we will see. So again, until the parts come in, I think that's going to be it for this segment of this video. Hope you're enjoying this. I think this is going to be another fun build. We should be able to knock this out pretty quickly. Again, these are kind of, you know, some cheap chassis and stuff. I hope you guys will do something really cool and jump on the forum, post your results, and share with us like the cool stuff you're doing. And Dolly's ready for dinner, so we're going to wrap it up here. Till next week, have a great day.